So, hi folks. So, for some reason you asked for soothing sounds about snails. You could have had Welsh folklore. You could have had Jason and the Argonauts. But no, snails. So, snails it is, and I'll be reading from the Wikipedia page about land snails. Physical characteristics. Land snails move by gliding along on their muscular foot, which is lubricated with mucus and covered with epithelial cilia. This motion is powered by succeeding waves of muscular contractions that move along down the ventral of the foot. This muscular action is clearly visible when a snail is crawling on the glass of a window or an aquarium. Snails move at a proverbially low speed. 1 millimeter per second is a typical speed for adult Helix leucorum. Snails secrete mucus externally to keep their soft bodies from drying out. They also secrete mucus from the foot to aid in locomotion by reducing friction, and to help reduce the risk of mechanical injury from sharp objects, meaning they can crawl over a sharp edge like a straight razor and not be injured. The mucus that land snails secrete with the foot leaves a slime trail behind them, which is often visible for some hours afterwards as a shiny path on the surface over which they have crawled. We are still live. Awesome. Snails, like all mollusks, also have a mantle, a specialized layer of tissue which covers all of the internal organs as they are grouped together in the visceral mass. The mantle also extends outward in flaps which reach to the edge of the shell and in some cases can cover the shell, which are partially retractable. The mantle is attached to the shell and creates the shell and makes shell growth possible by secretion. Most mollusks, including land snails, have a shell which is a part of their anatomy since the larval stage, and which grows with them in size by the process of secreting calcium carbonate along the open edge and on the inner side for extra strength. Although some land snails create shells that are almost entirely formed from the protein cochiolin, not sure. Most land snails need a good supply of calcium in their diet and environment to produce a strong shell. A lack of calcium or low pH in their surroundings can result in thin, cracked, or perforated shells. Usually, a snail can repair damage to its shell over time if its living conditions improve, but severe damage can be fatal. When retracted into their shells, many snails with gills, including some terrestrial species, are able to protect themselves with a door-like anatomical structure called an operculum. Land snails range greatly in size. The largest living species is the giant African snail or Ghana tiger snail, Achatina achatina, family Achatinidae, which can measure up to 30 centimeters. The largest land snails of non-tropical Eurasia are endemic Caucasian snails, Helix buccae, and Helix I should have practiced this beforehand. Helix gozziana from the southeastern Black Sea area in Georgia and Turkey. The diameter of the shell of the latter may exceed 6 centimeters. Most land snails bear 1 or 2 pairs of tentacles on their heads. In most land snails, the eyes are carried on the first, upper, set of tentacles, called omatophores, or more informally, eye stalks, which are usually roughly 75% of the width of the eyes. The second, lower set of tentacles act as olfactory organs. Both sets of tentacles are retractable in land snails. Digestion and nervous system. The snail breaks up its food using the radula inside its mouth. The radula is a chitinous ribbon-like structure containing rows of microscopic teeth. With this, the snail scrapes at food which is then transferred to the digestive tract. In a very quiet setting, a large land snail can be heard crunching its food. The radula is tearing away at the surface of the food that the snail is eating. It doesn't say here, but I learned on a different website that these little teeth are called denticles. The cerebral ganglia of the snail form a primitive brain which is divided into 4 sections. This structure is very much simpler than the brains of mammals, reptiles, and birds, but nonetheless, snails are capable of associative learning. As the snail grows, so does its calcium carbonate shell. The shell grows additively by the addition of new calcium carbonate, which is secreted by glands located in the snail's mantle. The new material is added to the edge of the shell aperture, the opening of the shell. Therefore, the center of the shell spiral was made when the snail was younger, and the outer part when the snail was older. When the snail reaches full adult size, it may build a thickened lip around the shell aperture. At this point, the snail stops growing and begins reproducing. The snail's shell forms a logarithmic spiral. Most snail shells are right-handed or dextral in coiling, meaning that if the shell is held with the apex, the tip, or the juvenile halls, pointing towards the observer, the spiral proceeds in a clockwise direction from the apex to the opening. Now, strictly speaking, the rest of this is not anatomy, but you may want to know more about snails, so I'll keep going for a little bit. Some snails hibernate during the winter. I am still going, awesome. Some snails hibernate during the winter, typically October through April in the northern hemisphere. They may also estivate in the summer in drought conditions. To stay moist during hibernation, a snail seals its shell opening with a dry layer of mucus called an epiphragm. The great majority of land snails are hermaphrodites, with a full set of reproductive organs of both sexes, able to reproduce both spermatozoa and ova. A few groups of land snails, such as the Pometidae, we're going to assume that's how it's said, which are distantly related to periwinkles, have separate sexes, male and female. The age of sexual maturity varies depending on species of snail, ranging from as little as 6 weeks to 5 years. Adverse environmental conditions may delay sexual maturity in some snail species. Most pulmonate air-breathing land snails perform courtship behaviors before mating. The courtship may last anywhere between 2 and 12 hours. In a number of different families of land snails and slugs, prior to mating, one or more love darts are fired into the body of the partner. Pulmonate land snails are prolific breeders and inseminate each other in pairs to internally fertilize their ova via a reproductive opening on one side of the body. Near the front, through which the outer reproductive organs are extruded so that sperm can be exchanged. Fertilization then occurs and the eggs develop. Each brood may consist of up to 100 eggs. Garden snails bury their eggs in shallow topsoil primarily while the weather is warm and damp, usually 5 to 6 centimeters down, digging with their foot. Egg sizes differ between species, from a 3 mm diameter in the grove snail to a 6 mm diameter in the giant African land snail. After 2 to 4 weeks of favorable weather, these eggs hatch and the young emerge. Snails may lay eggs as often as once a month. There have been hybridizations of snail species, though these do not commonly in the wild. In captivity, they can be coaxed into doing so. Parthenogenesis has been reported only in one species of slug, but many species can self-fertilize. Too many jokes, not enough time. But let's give you their lifespan, why not? Most species of land snail are annual. Others are known to live 2 or 3 years. but some of the larger species may live over 10 years in the wild. For instance, 10-year-old individuals of the Roman snail Helix pomatia are probably not uncommon in natural populations. Populations of some threatened species may be dependent on a pool of such long-lived adults. In captivity, the lifespan of snails can be much longer than in the wild, for instance up to 25 years in H. pomatia. I think we've given you all the snail anatomy that I can personally cope with. But yes, if you type anatomy of a snail or snail anatomy into Google, you will get a wide variety of texts and diagrams and enthusiasms. Some of the websites are dedicated to stopping snails, others to encouraging. I think one used the phrase "our slimy little friends," or possibly just "our slimy friends." Anyway, it's worth learning more about mollusks. I learned, for example, on totallyslugs.org.uk, something like that, that slugs actually have a little, still have that kind of calcium carbonate deposit, but they don't have the full shell. It's a bit like a vestigial thing since slugs evolved from snails. I always thought it was the other way around. There you go. Thank you, Twitter, for pushing me to learn more about our slimy friends. I'm going to sign off now. Have a wonderful weekend, and maybe I'll see you soon with more random facts to send you to sleep. Take care.